Palworld has officially fixed the entire gaming industry. Okay, Palworld did what some might seem impossible. Not only did it hit a peak of over 2 million concurrent live players, but they've found fans all over the globe, pissed off entire communities of Nintendo fanboys and fangirls. And not only that, but they did it within 2-3 weeks, okay? And now the game does have a limited play run, and many people are gonna put it down until while they wait for future updates, expansions, and all the rest of it. But Palworld did what so many large AAA titles have not been able to do in recent times. Now, what I want to get into is how did they pull it off, and can someone else repeat its success? So I think a handful of things really went into this. Firstly, the core gameplay loop is quite literally perfect in so many ways. Now, obviously there are improvements that can be made, but the gameplay loop is core to this title. The graphics, although I quite like the art style, are nothing to write home about, and the progression systems are pretty standard. The problem is that this feels both like a multiplayer and a single player game at the very same time, which is the one thing I think might have let it down a little bit. However, it seems to have pulled it off really well, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. So, what is this gameplay loop? Very simple. Go out into the environment, use your survival instincts to build new items, craft items, and then capture pals along the way. Not only that, but they can be used in your base. The combat system is really quite seamless. Hit a pal, throw a pal sphere, it's caught, you're done. Pokemon has not been able to add this combat system into their game basically ever. Now, Pokemon has done an okay job with Legends Arceus, but they slowed down the momentum a little bit too much. In the case of Palworld, the momentum is perfect all the way through. But the big thing here is all of the little niggly bits that other games have been doing lately that Palworld just flat out ignored, okay? The only one that it had in there was it had over encumberment and weight. However, the weight was completely different, and the way it was structured was completely different to every other game you've played in the past 3 to 4 years. And I think it might be the one core reason that Palworld has outshone all of them. The biggest example I can think of for a game that I've played a bit of is Starfield. Starfield has a serious inventory issue. Now, I know it might get better later on in the game, but there's no reason why it shouldn't start good and end good. There really is no reason. The problem is that you have to carry all your materials around all the time on your ship, on your body or whatever, and there's so many guns and things to pick up, and then you get over encumbered pretty much straight away. The weight limits are ridiculously crap, very, very frustrating. Palworld did away with all of that. Not only did it give you an insanely generous weight limit, it made it super easy for you to increase it, but the best part about it was the inventory sharing it did with things like your base. It didn't do anything like, you need to go and open this chest, take out this wood, and then build this thing. It just said, if you have it in a chest somewhere, you're good to go. Don't worry about all that other crap that makes games less fun. Here is a fun way to do it. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit in with the survival aesthetic a whole lot, and you can carry like incredibly stupid amounts of things in your pockets on your single character.
I've never seen those before in my life.
Bazooka?
I have a permit for that.
It does not matter. It's fun, it's effective, it's intuitive, and it just strips away all of the hassle that people keep putting in games to either make you pay more money or just to slow them down artificially, or more importantly, they're doing this for some sort of weird realism. Now, I love realism in a game as much as the next guy. Personally, I think Tarkov does it really, really well, but you don't need to do it. And there's a lot of people out there that just don't want to deal with that. Not only that, but people have grown up with video games, okay? All of the people playing actual video games on things like the PC and consoles, a lot of the people playing the high-end AAA games are adults now. They don't have 20, 30 hours a week to kill on video games. They have 5 to 10 hours. So if it's really painful to play, even for the little things, they're gonna switch off and they're gonna leave straight away. This is why Palworld was successful. It was really hard to say anything bad about the game, and there were no game-breaking bugs, which helped a lot, but it was really hard to say anything bad. You jump in, and no matter what, you're going to have a good time, whether that's catching a new pal, building a new thing, or just progressing through the game without having to go, back and forth to your base, putting all of your items back in storage. Now, I know I harped on that point for a long time, but I really think it does boil down to that quite a bit. Now, the other things that helped with Palworld's success were obviously the pricing. It is not classified as a AAA game because the studio is quite small, and it had a limited budget and funding, supposedly about $7 million, even though they used the skeleton of Craftopia, and it sold for only $30 on Steam. How much did the price tag help? I think it definitely helped with virality, if nothing else, and I think that's very important to consider. The game went viral very easily because it was $30. A streamer jumps on and plays the game, everyone says, how much is it, can I buy it? And they say, yes, it's $30. That turns your 1 million people that were going to download it into 5 million people that are now looking at it, okay? It really does ramp it up quite exponentially, whereas I would say for $100, maybe 100 people are interested, and for $50, you've got maybe 200, 300 people, and then $10, you've got like 2,000 people. People are willing to throw money at it for a meme, okay? Being on Steam helps too because people know they can get a refund. So all of these factors come in to help with the initial virality. I don't think it needed to stay at $30 for a long time or anything. Starting off at $30 definitely helps with that. I definitely think they could have sold it for more and made significantly more revenue, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe you get as many players in as possible to love you and your IP, and then you sell DLCs and your sequels and things, and you ramp up the price a little bit. You build up a studio how they used to be built back in the day, and none of that crazy monetization models, okay? The other thing that I want to talk about on Palworld's success is actually how do I put this? The game is feature complete. Now, what do I mean by this? Is it had public servers for people to play on, because everyone loves multiplayer, especially on day one. If Elden Ring launched without multiplayer, probably wouldn't be a big deal. If Overwatch launched without multiplayer, would be a big deal. It's something in the middle is probably something like a Diablo. If Diablo did not launch with multiplayer functionality, then a lot of people wouldn't buy the game at all. Okay, that's just how it is. Like a game that has a pretty solid single player, but a lot of people love to play for multiplayer, it has to have both components. The other thing was they had systems in place to host servers. They didn't have any crazy server throttling like someone like Helldivers 2 did. Obviously, they were a very successful game too, and we'll talk about them in a moment, but they didn't have any huge server issues. Now, it wasn't great, but they resolved them very, very quickly. And they have a non-Wi-Fi single player experience. That is a big deal for a lot of people where they just want to jump on. They don't want to, well, they might still be connected to their internet, but if something happens, they want a game that they can play that doesn't require an internet connection, which is quite fascinating because the Steam charts might not be including those players.
Great Scott. I know, this is heavy.
The other thing is that it had a start, a middle, and an end. And the end always has to be considered. In Pokemon, I would say that it has two endpoints. Now, I'm going to talk about Pokemon because it's very important. Every single game releases with these, and if they don't, I think you would have some serious issues. Pokemon releases with some sort of competitive system. People can go in and play PvP ranked against other players. And it also has an endgame collecting mechanic, which is shiny Pokemon. Palworld not only had shiny Pokemon, it had really great replayability with things like building new bases and stuff like that, but it had an end game in that you could join multiplayer servers and stuff like that, and so you could get endless of hours of fun on a single world. If they did not launch with any of these factors, it would have been an issue. If they launched with PvP, it would have been even better. Their concurrence would have hit way higher than it did. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm telling you right now, if they launched with that final core feature that they needed, their concurrent player count would have been higher than PUBG. They would have smashed every single record, would have hit 4 or 5 million easily, given the PvP was fun, obviously. The other thing we should mention is that Enshrouded launched shortly after and has really similar mechanics, but it didn't match the success of Palworld. Now, why is that? Graphically, much more impressive. Survival mode and in-depth of that, much more detailed, much more impressive. It has some really great voxel features, but Palworld has pals and Enshrouded doesn't. Now, I don't know if I'm going to chalk this entire thing up to pals and the fact that you can capture creatures, send them out for battle and all the rest of it, but it does make the game more fun, and I'm sure it's more fun than Enshrouded for that reason partly. Maybe Palworld launching first made a big difference as well, but I really do think that the pals filled that gameplay loop perfectly, if you know what I mean. There's something about if you go out and you defeat a bad guy and you pick up their weapon, that's a certain kind of loot. If you go out, you defeat a pal and capture it, not only do you have the fact that you got something new, kind of like picking up a weapon, but you also get this rolling, these chances, all this randomness. You get the RNG and gacha style gameplay that so many games have been successful with. You get to go, okay, I caught this tansy. Does it have really good abilities? Can I breed it with my other tansy? You get all of those sorts of elements. And then when you're exploring the world, you also get the elements of, I hope I see a shiny soon, or I hope I see this pal, or wow, this thing's a high level, I can fight it. There's so much excitement in going out into a world and things randomly spawning, but not just terrain like Minecraft. Although that solves that excitement quite well as well with things like diamonds. But it's not just terrain, it's the creatures that you encounter and the sorts of different experiences you're gonna have, even if you visited that same place before. Gaming doesn't do that very often nowadays. And I think that's also the reason Helldivers 2 is so successful. It has this overarching story that continues and evolves over time. And similar to Palworld, there's always something new to do around the corner. Eventually you can finish the game and maybe you jump on a different server and play with different friends, or set yourself a little challenge. The game ends, which is why PvP would have been so critical to make it even more successful than it already was. The other thing we should mention is that Palworld took an unorthodox approach that many other titles have not done. The Palworld community, developers, team, CEO, everyone, they are extremely vocal. That is something I cannot say for pretty much any other AAA game out there. The CEOs and other devs are often silent. When a controversy comes, they'll come out of the woodwork. But for the game's success or other issues, they're completely silent. People appreciate the transparency of Palworld. Pocketpair was tweeting when they had some of those initial server issues straight away, and they were reassuring everyone, they were talking to everyone. In the Discord, they mentioned all of the bugs and issues they've found, and they let everyone know. That sort of communication is unseen of in the gaming industry today, and it's one of the reasons Palworld is so successful and will continue to be successful into the future. People are craving that sort of interaction with the people who make their games, and Palworld finally leveraged that. The only thing I will say that is to Palworld's detriment is the PAL designs are really uninspired. Now, this has nothing to do with Pokemon. As long as they're a different design, different name, they do different things, I don't care too much if they were inspired from something else. Now, I'm a designer and a creative, so I really hate copyright when people steal other people's work, and there's probably some of that in Palworld's list, but all I'm trying to say is that the designs are just uninspired in general. They're really boring. The PALs don't look like they fit into the world all that well. Like, for example, in Pokemon, you have like Stunfisk and it's like a bear trap, and that's pretty cool because you've got this whole story around that. Why did it evolve in that way? I didn't really get that from Palworld. The lack of story, the lack of world building kind of leaves that up to the imagination, which isn't bad in some sense. But I think if they had really strong PAL designs, they would have done even better than they already did. Now, what does Palworld have to do next? Unfortunately, now they're a little bit on the clock. They could fall into obscurity eventually, especially since their overall aesthetic is a little bit dated and might become a little bit weaker over time. But there's plenty that they can do to keep hammering on this success and maybe become one of the biggest and most successful games in the world. I definitely think community modding is a big part of that, making it really easy for communities to mod and everyone to join a massive multiplayer servers with really fascinating rules attached. Some of my favorite times playing Minecraft were actually playing Tekkit mods. We could build lots of really crazy contraptions. You allow the community to build Palworld and it would become the largest game on the planet, built around that core gameplay loop. Imagine if community members could add in a brand new PAL, and so every hour you're playing the game, people have added like 3 or 4 PALs in, and there's something new you encounter that's brand new because some random person in the community made it. You go down that road, you add in PvP and really fun competitive engagement, and Palworld will be the greatest game of all time.